Hi guys, and welcome back to another episode of Questions with Connie. Today is going to be the first of a new series of videos I want to do called Movie Talk Mondays. And ta-da! Action. So I want to talk about different subjects when it comes to movies, including new movies that come out that I get to see and discuss those with you guys and what I think about them. But I also want to talk about different types of lists that I want to do. So today's video, I want to do the top movies that have stuck with me. And I'm not doing these in any particular order, just so you guys know, this is not a list of most memorable to least. No, this is just kind of a mixed bag of movies that I think stuck with me and will stick with me pretty much forever. And of course, there are going to be movies that I'm sure I have not really thought about or left off this list because I have seen thousands of movies. So comment below once you watch this video to let me know movies that have stuck with you, ones that you haven't forgot about since you've seen them, and just kind of, either in a good or bad way, keep you thinking about them. Without further ado, let's get into it. The first one that I want to talk about is The Mist. So this movie is one that I think has a very polarized reaction to it. So either you really love the movie or you hate it. And I mean, honestly, it all depends on exactly what you are focusing on the movie. So the reason I say that is because the ending really is the make or break for most people on it. So there is some CGI when it comes to some of the monsters involved. So I know that kind of makes some people not feel that it's very realistic, and that kind of throws them off, which is fine. I mean, everybody has their cup of tea, right? But to me, the biggest thing for this movie and why it stuck with me is the social aspect of it. So any movie that really kind of talks about the social aspect of humanity and how people react in certain situations, to me, makes a movie a great watch. And the reason for that is because it makes for good discussion. So me and my husband really like to talk about movies while we watch them, after we watch them, and the more thought-provoking, the better, in our opinion. But this movie is one of those that the ending, man, and I'm not going to talk about it because I don't want to give it away. If you haven't seen it, watch it. It's worth watching. But the ending definitely makes you go. So it either has you feeling, really terrible, or it has you feeling really confused or angry or whatever you may, think. But either way, it's one of those that you never forget once you've seen it. So that's why it's definitely on my list of movies that stay with you. The next one I'm going to talk about is Hereditary. This one is a definite scary movie. So The Mist I would say is more of a sci-fi thriller, but Hereditary is definitely a horror film through and through. And what sticks with you most, and what sticks with you the most, I think, is the slow burn creep factor. So this one just has this very unique slow crawl but very effective creepiness to it that I just have not really seen in a lot of movies, and I think that makes it unique. But there is one scene in particular that, for two reasons, has stuck with me. One, because I saw it in theaters. The entire theater was completely dead silent at this particular scene. And that kind of added to the effect of the scene because of just how intense it is. If you've seen this movie, then I know you know what I'm talking about. The scene that involves the allergic reaction. That's as much as I'll say, because again, I don't want to give anything away if any of these movies are something you haven't seen. But when that scene goes silent, it is very effective because basically, as an onlooker and as a watcher of the movie, you take on the same sort of shock and emotion that the character you're watching has, just because it is so crazy and comes on so quickly that you don't really have time to process what just happened. So for that reason, Hereditary will be one that, bar none, for sure will stick with me forever because of that particular scene. And once you see it, you'll definitely know what I'm talking about. So the end of that movie is one that I can't really stomach after the first time. And it's because it's just kind of a gnarly watch. So again, if you've seen the movie, then you understand what I'm saying. But if you haven't, then you'll understand when you get there and you see it. It's kind of one of those that most people either don't want to watch, or once they've watched it, won't watch again. I would watch it again because I really appreciate when a scary movie, or really a movie in general, does anything unique to shock me. Because that's pretty hard to do considering how many movies I have seen. And when a movie can do that, I'm impressed. Whether it's in a good way or a bad way, it's definitely impressive. So I would say this one is particular for that. Another one that is very effective in doing a similar thing is Midsommar. So I watched this against my better judgment. I will, full disclosure on that. I saw many people saying that you shouldn't watch this movie because it is awful and people wanted to wash their brains after watching it. So I kind of more or less knew what I was getting myself into. But because it gets referenced, in memes or other things like that, I'm one of those people that I want to know, I want to be able to get those memes and understand the references when they happen. So of course, after holding off for a very long period of time on watching it, I let my curiosity get to me, especially because it was free on one of the channels that I already am subscribed to. So I was like, might as well go ahead and watch it and see what's going on. If it's really awful, then I'll just turn it off, right? Well, I watched it all the way through, and it absolutely is one of those that stays with you. There's also a very, very, very terrible scene in the movie where everything kind of goes all the way south. So little by little throughout the movie, things are kind of slow burn going south and in a very creepy direction where you're almost yelling at the main character, like, get out of there, what are you doing, turn around. But this scene in particular, and just to kind of describe it so you know what I'm referencing, is the scene where they are at this cliff-like situation, and there's an older gentleman who is on the cliff above, and that's as much as I'll say from there. But that scene, oh my god, it's bad. And it's one of those that, again, definitely scars your brain. And so I totally understood after watching that scene why so many people were disturbed by this movie and warned people against watching it. But just to kind of put it out there, a lot of horror movies are going to have things that trigger people. Because, ultimately, that's kind of their point, right? You're supposed to be triggered, you're supposed to be scared, you're supposed to be uncomfortable, you're supposed to be creeped out. So all of those things are kind of a given when it comes to this genre. I kind of expect that going in. So when I watch scary movies, this is just kind of one of those things that I know it kind of comes with the territory. So I definitely think that is one of those movies. Again, I watched it the one time. Won't watch it again because that was more than enough. But if you want to get the references, you want to understand why people are scarred by that movie, then watch it. But if you don't want to watch it, that's okay too. And I don't blame you. So, moving on. The next movie I want to talk about is VHS. So, this is one that not a lot of people, I'm sure, hear about because it's kind of more of the, I would say, kind of B title in a way, because there's no major characters. It is kind of a lot of different stories weaved together, and it's done in kind of a found footage style. So it's unique for a lot of different reasons, in the sense of the way that they mold all this together. It's done well. I would describe it as kind of the creepy feeling you get when you're telling ghost stories around the campfire type thing. And almost like a Are You Afraid of the Dark and Tales from the Crypt elevated, made scarier and creepier, and then combine those things with that movie Crash, as far as the layout of how they weave everything together, kind of like that. So VHS just kind of has a lot of different things that it puts together, a lot of different stories that can either be short stories standalone, or you could just weave them all together as either the same timeline, different timelines, who really knows. But it's very intriguing to watch. You definitely are on your toes the whole time you're watching it, and I found it interesting start to finish. But the one part in particular that stuck with me, well, actually there's two parts, I would say, but the bigger one is there's a scene with a girl that keeps saying, "I like you." And when you watch the movie, or if you've seen the movie, again, you know what I'm referencing, but it's extremely disturbing what happens, and the fact that in each of these stories they just kind of drop you off without really having a conclusion to each one makes VHS unique and standalone. The next movie I'm going to talk about is The Collector and the Collection. So, my husband in particular, I have to warn anytime I want to watch that movie or put it on, because The Collector, and both of them they're basically like a part 1 and 2. Although I believe there's a different actor that plays the main character, the bad guy, in both movies. But either way, it doesn't take away from the storyline or the movies, at least in my opinion. But the second one, called The Collection, wow. So that one just kind of starts out heavy hitting. There is a part in that one where they're at a club and something major happens. And again, I don't want to give it all away, but there's just a part that is brutal, and it's something I did not see coming. And so when it happened, it was just like, wow, what just happened? And again, when a movie can do that, when I have seen so many, it's going to stick with me. So that is one that's definitely different. And I would describe those movies as kind of a Saw meets The Cell kind of vibe. And yeah, if you've seen either of those movies, Saw the series or The Cell with Jennifer Lopez, then you know kind of the vibe I'm talking about. So because of some of the booby traps, reminds me of Saw, and because of some of the way that the victims are kind of held on to, reminds me of The Cell. But yeah, definitely one of those that, because of some of the ways that people die in those movies, is definitely unique. So if you are into either of The Cell or Saw, I would highly recommend watching The Collector, just because it's crazy and it's definitely a good watch. Next on my list is As Above, So Below. So this movie, wow. So this one, it really gets you fully immersed in this whole underground spelunking thing. So to describe the movie, it's these people are going, well, in particular this one girl is trying to find the Sorcerer's Stone, and she is basically getting other people to go with her on this expedition into the catacombs in France to look for this thing. And it basically kind of is like they end up going into hell, I guess is the way to put it. And it's a crazy ride start to finish. By the time, well, first of all, anything underground or in small areas that people have to kind of squeeze through, that already gives me anxiety because I have claustrophobia. I don't like being in teeny tiny spaces, and the idea of trying to go into a cave and squeeze through anything really horrifies me. And so that was one layer that already put me at unease. But the whole time, they're just kind of going deeper and deeper into this thing, and you don't know what's going to happen or if they're ever going to get out. So it just kind of fully immerses you into that. And because of that, and because I feel like that's a little different, even though I know there are movies like The Descent and other movies that have done this before, it's not quite the same. If you watch it, you'll understand what I'm saying, but it just sticks with me for the simple purpose of the fully immersion into the underground world, but also the ending. The ending is very similar to the ending in Mirrors. If you've seen that movie, or if you haven't seen that movie, they kind of are very similar in the way that they end. That kind of leaves you kind of mind boggled, or at least it left me that way. So I definitely say if you liked Mirrors and you didn't mind how it ended, watch As Above, So Below. Definitely a good watch. Next on my list is a movie called Contracted. This one, whoa. So this one I ended up having my mom and sister watch after I watched it, because I thought it was a very underrated, more of the B-title movie that I hadn't heard about ever. And once I watched it, I was like, wow, that was actually crazy gross in a good kind of way. If you're looking for a horror movie, then gross is part of the deal. But yeah, Contracted definitely was you're totally along the ride with the main character the whole time. And it is very unique in the way that it plays out, because it is not your typical scary movie at all. And by the end of it, you kind of feel just as panicked as the main character, and you're kind of fully invested in what's going to happen. If you're okay with a little grossness, definitely a great watch. I thought it was very unique in the way that they set up the story, and so many things made me go, oh God. And that, like I said, is something that not necessarily is a bad thing when it comes to scary movies. So it stuck with me because there are so many scenes in it that definitely make you wince. But the whole storyline, and again, I can't give too much away because if you haven't seen it, I don't want to spoil it for you. But the way that it is set up, kind of is adjacent to It Follows, but definitely more gruesome. So I definitely thought about it a lot afterward. I still think about it every now and then because it's just an insane ride of a movie. So if you haven't seen it, never heard of it, definitely a great movie to watch. Another one I want to talk about that is not very well known, or at least it's not a mainstream movie, is Hell House LLC. So this movie was one that I actually had to stop watching, which has never ever happened for me. I am one of those people that I used to watch Freddy Krueger movies when I was in elementary school, which, Definitely probably not appropriate, of course, because no kid should be watching horror movies at that age. But but the reason I say that is because I am pretty desensitized to most things in horror. But this movie freaked me out to the point that I had to stop the movie and watch something else in the middle of the night while watching it, because it just creeped me out to that point. The other impressive part about that is that they don't use like crazy CGI or anything like that to accomplish that creep factor. And this scene that I'm talking about in particular, so just to kind of give you a general idea of what the movie's about. So it's a movie about these people that are kind of getting together to create a haunted house. And they buy this place that was a previous satanic ritual type place, which, yeah, first and foremost, why would you do that? But but that's most scary movies. Anything they do, you're kind of like rolling your eyes and like, that's the dumbest idea ever. But that's what makes scary movies, because smart people wouldn't be in those situations and there would be no movie. So, there's that. But they do that and they're gonna set up this haunted house, and while they're doing that, all these awful things start to happen. And part of what happens involves some of their mannequins that they've set up with masks on popping up in places they weren't put. So that's all I'll say about that. But this one scene in particular involves one of the people needing to leave, going to the stairs, and one of those things being at the bottom of the stairs. So that is my idea of terror and torture. Definitely, it's kind of one of those things like when you were a kid, you always imagine something awful being there in the dark when you're trying to run away or go up the stairs or whatever it is. So the fact that they did that, and this person's supposed to be trying to leave and they have no other choice but to go down those stairs. Brilliant, because it is, again, tapping into my childhood fears, and immediately made me go, nope, I can't watch this anymore. It is middle of the night. They've got those strobe lights going on in the movie, and it is just freaking me out. The way that this mannequin thing looks, I can't do it. So I had to turn it off and then watch it the next day finish the movie the next day during daylight. But, that's why that movie will, to this day, stick with me. And again, if a movie can impress me or shock me to that extent, well done. So I definitely have that one on my list for that reason. Another movie I have on the list is Sinister. So Sinister is definitely a blockbuster hit movie. It stars Ethan Hawke, and Ethan Hawke has also been in Black Phone and is just a really great actor, period. But I never imagined him doing horror until he did Daybreakers, and I really love that movie. I know it's not that great rated, but when you have a scene with a vampire exploding, I mean, it's a great movie. But anyhow, and also it stars one of the big actors from Jurassic Park, so one of a favorite movies of mine since childhood. So of course, when I saw that and Willem Dafoe being in it, I was like, okay, gotta be decent. If you haven't seen Daybreakers, that's another honorable mention. Great vampire movie. So Sinister, great movie because it has this soundtrack. And I mean, the soundtrack can really make or break a movie, period. And if you've never noticed that, try listening to just the soundtrack of a movie, or try watching a movie with no sound, or a scene with no sound, or isolating just the voices, And it's a huge factor when it comes to the way that these movies are presented and the way that we consume them as a viewer. But Sinister, man, it just has some sound effects in it that give you the goosebumps, the hairs raise on the back of your neck. But the main thing, part of what they do so well in this movie that is horrifying and stays with you, is some of the ways that these families in the movie meet their ends. Oh man, like there's just some that I really, even to this day, after having seen the movie multiple times, I still have to close my eyes or turn away from the screen because they're so crazy, and because even the mere thought of someone meeting their end that way is too much. So yeah, for that reason, that is definitely one that sticks with me for sure. In a similar way, on that same note, the Terrifier, any of the ones, and this is Art the Clown, who is from the Terrifier movies, his look alone is horrifying and unique, but the kills and also just how creepy the character is, and the fact that he never says a single word the entire movie, but manages to be one of the most creepy and disturbing killers that I've seen in a scary movie, is why I definitely am a fan of the Terrifier movies. This is not a up there in production value type movie. I still love the movies, don't get me wrong, and I still recommend watching them just because they're one of those crazy movies that you should probably at least watch once. But I just really appreciate, again, when any movie does something different, and this one definitely does, as far as the main character just being awful in every possible way, but effective in being memorable. So definitely a good watch on the Terrifier. Another one that I would like to talk about that is different completely than those movies is Talk to Me. So for this movie in particular, I felt like it was one of those elevated horrors, in my opinion, because it kind of played into mental health a little, in the sense that the main character is dealing, or really trying not to deal with or face, the loss of her mother. And so that plays a big part in why she ends up susceptible to what happens to her later in the movie. I felt like the way they did everything in the movie was very brilliantly done, effective, without having to do a ton of, again, CGI or crazy monsters or too many huge jump scares. It's just completely different than any one I've seen before about possession. So I highly recommend seeing it if you haven't. And again, be open-minded to the different layers of storyline that are being told in it, because it's just crazy. But again, there's the one scene that definitely sticks with you, the scene with the younger main character, and when the possession happens with him, ensues thereafter. And I'll leave it at that because, again, don't want to spoil it, but yeah, it's a crazy intense scene that just makes you look away from the screen and go, oh God. And again, those moments are the ones that make me remember the movie, because I'm kind of stained mentally by those scenes, I guess. But on a different note, another movie that I would like to mention is You're Next, because that one is the total opposite. So that one has a character that does everything you would want in a final girl. So if you're looking for a movie that is completely opposite of most scary movies that you've ever seen, where someone does everything you would want them to do, or that you're screaming at the screen for them to do, this is one that is definitely worth watching, because that is kind of what happens and what you get. I love watching that movie just because the main character does such a great job in making you root for her and being so happy when she basically whoops butt the whole time that things are going south. But yeah, definitely a great watch for that one as well. And another one that I think will stick with me forever, but is a unique watch, is Autopsy of Jane Doe. Man, this movie just, I mean, it is chilling start to finish. It keeps you interested in what's going on, what's going to happen, makes you wonder what happened to the person, the Jane Doe in other words. And there's just all these supernatural things that are going on with this body in particular. And basically the setup is that it's a pathologist and his son, who is kind of his protege, and they have a body of a Jane Doe brought in. And the son was going to leave and go on a date, but he doesn't, and he ends up staying to help his dad with this autopsy. Well, all these crazy things start happening because his dad is trying to teach him, but while doing the autopsy, they realize all these impossible things are going on with this corpse, and things just kind of start unraveling and going crazier and crazier. So it is a non-stop ride from beginning to end, and the song alone at the end of it definitely stays with you, for sure. And it is one that I would definitely watch again. It will be one that's a staple for Halloween time of year because it's crazy and super scary, and for sure one that I think about every now and then just because of how nuts the movie is. But that is where I will end the list for now, guys. I'm sure there are a ton of movies that I will think of later on while watching them, or when I think about watching them, or when something pops up about them that I've missed from this list, or I will probably even redo this video at some point with a completely different list at another time, I'm sure. But that is it for now. I'm going to wrap this up here. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you've seen some of these movies that I'm talking about, comment below. Let me know what you thought about them. If you loved them, hated them, or if you also thought they would stick with you, let me know. If there's other movies that you would recommend that maybe I haven't seen, definitely comment below. I would love to know your recommendations, so that way I can go ahead and add some new movies to my collection and maybe discuss those later. I've enjoyed doing this video and talking about this with you guys, and I look forward to doing other Movie Talk Mondays later. Bye, guys. Thanks again so much for watching, guys. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe and notification bell to make sure you get notified anytime I post new videos.